Hey guys, welcome back to History Revision Success. So in today's video, I want to run through what the exam board AQA have released for the 1C Tudors paper for the 2022 exam. So you know exactly what you need to learn, you know exactly what questions you need to know. Now, I am going to go through all of those kind of thematic questions that I refer to in my video on how to revise history. So if you haven't seen that, I do recommend you go and watch that. But in this video, I'm hoping to break down those topics into those key questions, into those key themes, so you really know what it is you need to go and learn. This is obviously somewhat my own interpretation of that list. So just a disclaimer, obviously this is my opinion. But yeah, let's get on with it. So just a quick one to announce at the end of the video, I'm going to be talking about this in a little bit more detail, but I do want to host some kind of lectures, I guess, over the Easter break in April, and they will take the form of essentially a 40-minute kind of run through where I will go through all the information with you that I would be discussing with pupils if I was doing kind of one-to-one tutoring. The idea of this is that it's at a much lower price, £10 per session, and it's more in the form of a lecture rather than kind of an interactive session. So I'm just going to deliver to you all of that key information, those key conclusions, that key topic conversation that you need to know. Details at the end. So what's this advanced information that's been given out? Well, basically AQA and all the exam boards have provided a list of information this year, which contains the topics you need to go and revise. They have said you need to learn the whole course still, but questions are going to be taken from this list. It gives you a targeted list to focus your revision on. So what should you revise? I'm going to run through that in a moment, going through all the different topics on that list and going through what you need to know. So this is what the advanced content looks like. We've got all of our sections there with all of the bullet points that have been included, and anything that's not there has now been discluded from the list of questions you will receive. So starting from Henry VII, consolidation of power. So in terms of consolidation of power, what I think you need to be able to answer is, how does he consolidate power? How far he secures the throne against threats. So what's the main factor that leads him to consolidate his power? Is it his own personal action? Is it financial methods? Is it penalties and sanctions? Is it patronage and positive things? What was the reason he is able to consolidate his throne? And then secondary to that, how far, to what extent does he consolidate his power? How far does he secure the throne? How far does he establish the Tudor dynasty? Now, finally, how far is he able to control the nobility? Also, perhaps, how far is he able to control the people? Have a look at the rebellions. Think about how far he manages to control the people within his society. Governance, how effectively is he able to govern England? How successfully does he change systems that are in place for it to work and function? Now, this is a big kind of idea, you know, how similar was Tudor governance to previous kings and way of kingship? It also links to the fourth question I'm going to go through in a second. So I might just touch back on that in a minute. But how successful was his financial policy? I think that one's obvious, weighing up pros and cons. How far does it work? How efficient was it? How revolutionary was it, perhaps? And then finally, this idea of, was he able to establish a new monarchy? Did he rule in a different way to those who came before him? That's quite difficult. If you would like me to film a video on that, then please do leave a comment below about this idea of new monarchy. But yeah, that's governance. Foreign policy is always a simple one, I think. When you're going through foreign policy, it's really how successful were they in foreign policy. For Henry, we're going to add, how far is he able to consolidate his rule internationally? As you should be aware, he faces a lot of international threats, partly to do, notably to do with the pretenders and that idea of him not having fully consolidated his throne. So is he able to get there? Does he achieve his aims with foreign policy? And then into society. So we've got what was the main cause of rebellion under Henry, and that's it really. So that covers all of the points under Henry. And if you know the answers to all those questions and you know what you'd include in essays, you should be able to write any essay they could ask you. Henry VIII, character. Now this is a very difficult one and it's quite ambiguous really. They've left it in on the checklist. In terms of questions, I think they would mostly surround the idea of how far is he personally influencing his reign? How far does his own attributes, his own character, his own likes and dislikes come into his the way he governs? An obvious area for this would be in foreign policy to do with war. How far is he the one pushing war through, trying to be the warrior king like Henry V? How successfully does he manage the throne in the early years? So rather than thinking about that as a governance thing, which it could be, which also is on your advanced information, but thinking about that more as a legacy thing. How far does he take over the legacy of Henry VII? How successful is he in inheriting the throne and passing on that legacy? Government. So under Henry VIII, we've got this important topic of the role of kind of individuals versus the king. So how significant was Wolsey, and then later how significant was Cromwell? And then also what was the main cause of Wolsey's fall and Cromwell's fall as well? What was the main reason for that to happen? How far was there a revolution in government? How far did Henry change government? Remember, some of the key themes to this whole module is change and continuity. You're going to be asked about a period of time. How far are things changing over that period of time? And then finally, tying back into Wolsey and Cromwell, how far does he let others rule for him? How far was he the king, or how far were others kind of puppeting him or ruling for him? Foreign policy, how successful was he? And how responsible was he for failures? Religious policy, how welcomed was the Reformation? What was the state of the pre-Reformation church? Those two kind of tie into each other. How far did religion change in England? You know, the extent to which even after the Act of Supremacy and the Reformation, up to Henry's death, how far does religion actually change, or perhaps change back? And then how strong was opposition to religious change? Going into the mid-Tudor crisis, now I find the most efficient way of learning this is, rather than learning this as Edward, Mary, early years of Elizabeth, learning this thematically down the whole strand, because arguably none of these monarchs, Edward or Mary or the early years of Elizabeth, are enough of a time period for you to be asked about them individually. I highly doubt that. There's obviously a chance, but I highly doubt it. Instead, they're more likely to ask you across a spread of time. Edward and Mary, Edward, Mary, Elizabeth, even the last years of Henry VIII, Edward, Mary, and even perhaps Elizabeth on the end. So I look at these in more of a strand. Finance through all these monarchs, religion through all these monarchs, governance through all these monarchs. How effective was it? How efficient was it? Which was the most destabilizing? And then in addition to that, some kind of key questions that you should be able to answer. To what extent was there actually a mid-Tudor crisis? That's a key question. Which factor was the most significant? Was religion the most destabilizing, finance, or bad governance, as I mentioned earlier? How far did religion change across the period? Equally, that word could be substituted for finance or economic policy or style of governance. And then to what extent did Elizabeth manage to fix the crisis? Does she fix it in those early years? I'm going to do one of my lecture series on this topic. I think it's very difficult to approach, but once you've approached it systematically, it can become far, far clearer. If you would like to attend that, wait till the end, follow the link in the description, you can find out how to sign up. But I will be going through these questions and how to approach, how to answer them in that session. Oh, finally, to what extent was government weak? Now, Elizabeth, so they've cut out quite a bit of Elizabeth's reign, which is good in a way, you don't have to revise so much. Foreign policy. So under the exam board specification, foreign policy really concentrates on the Anglo-Spanish relationship and the role of Spain. It focuses on Mary, Queen of Scots, and issues of succession. Now, I think it's worthwhile also knowing about what happens with France during this time period, and understanding what's happening in Ireland, and being able to therefore tie everything together and really think about what was the greatest foreign policy threat. So starting off, I would always find your answer to what was the most significant threat to Elizabeth, which country or which group of people really posed the most damaging threat to her. Were the greatest threats Catholic? Now, I've seen a lot of questions which bring together that idea of Catholicism and international threat together. Were countries threatening because they were Catholic, or were they threatening for other reasons? What was the main reason for the breakdown in the Anglo-Spanish relationship? So obviously you need to know about the timeline of what happens between England and Spain, going through kind of the build up to the Armada, the breakdown of that relationship, Netherlands, etc. Then you've got the Armada itself, and then you've got the post-Armada that runs almost, well, right up to actually Elizabeth's death. So really understanding that full picture and being able to describe where those turning points are and why things break down. And then another one where they tie in two things together. So just under society, I'll get to in a second for Elizabeth, we've got the question of social disorder, rebellion. And I've seen questions where they tie that together. International or domestic threats, which one was greater? And then society, as I said, how far does society change? You've got the issue here of the growth of the gentry. Historian Elton makes a suggestion about that. You've also got the changes that take place within Parliament at this time. So even though government isn't on this advanced list, I would probably go back and just refresh your memory on that. Make sure you understand why Parliament and the demographic of Parliament is changing, because that reflects changing society. What was the main cause of rebellion? How far did rebellions actually threaten the crown? Now, again, I'm doing a lecture session all about rebellion and disorder across the whole period. It's one of the themes which come up consistently through this advanced information, and I'm going to be giving some overarching conclusions about rebellion and disorder, the main cause under different monarchs, the change over the Tudor dynasty, how far the crown and the dynasty become accepted, and what evidence we can use to defend that. Finance. So finance covers quite a huge amount under Elizabeth. You've got the idea of the actual financial state itself and how far it recovers, how far it changes. You've got the idea of trade and exploration, the beginning of mercantilism, etc. You've also got the impact on the poor and the ordinary man. Is life any better for them? So did life improve for Englishmen under Elizabeth? And I haven't got the question here, but you also need to obviously know about trade and how that would fit in to I guess, either one of these questions. Now, just to bring it back to these lectures I keep talking about, these are the three I'm going to cover: mid-Tudor crisis, focusing on finance, Elizabeth I's foreign policy, and then social disorder and rebellion across the whole period, hoping to get through all of that information in 40 minutes. If I don't quite manage it, I'll provide the notes, so you have those notes anyway. And as I said, £10 to attend each session. You can send me a message via my website, which is linked below, and express which sessions you want to be involved in. I've also got sessions for the Weimar Nazi Germany topic, which we follow running the week later. If there's loads and loads of interest, if you want more of these topics that I run through, do let me know, and I'll consider putting on some other sessions across the Easter break, maybe in the afternoon. We could run some other ones on different topics. So thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful and can help you frame your revision for these exams.